If there's a monster coming at you in the house, you can describe the monster, you can deal with the monster. But when you don't know, there's something that's going on that's you can't identify.
That's the voice of Peter, brother to our friend Ted, a young man whose hidden mental disorder is about to finally and completely hijack his brain and take us on a chilling, real-life journey into a terrifying disease. Now, with insights from Ted's brothers Vaughn and Peter, and Associate Professor at the University of Calgary, Dr. Thomas Radler, this is part 3 of Years Without Rain.
I remember one night I felt as if a great dark force was coming into my apartment, and if I didn't get out of my apartment, then something terrible was going to happen. So I got on my boots and my winter jacket, no gloves, no hat, and I took off down the stairs running like you wouldn't believe. I bolted out the bottom of the fire escape, and I decided I would go uptown. The police station is right uptown, and I got a message from my brain that said I was supposed to run through the snow and slam myself into one of the bushes in front of the police station because that was training for West Point. So that's what I did. Ran straight through the snowbank, and fortunately it was just a willow bush, so it wasn't a big thing, so I didn't get hurt that bad.
2 months after negative schizophrenic symptoms lost him his job at a car dealership, positive schizophrenic symptoms began to cause Ted's brain to overthink and overwhelm it with voices and hallucinations. Dr. Radler.
Imagine if you're constantly hearing a person or several people talk to you. In many cases, unfortunately, it's not positive content, so they're not praising you. For a lot of people, they actually get what we call chromatic hallucinations, where the voices tell them to do something because otherwise bad things could happen. And for some people, it can also be the voice of God, which may give these voices more credibility. For a lot of people, it's from the moment they wake up in the morning to the moment they go to bed. It's voices, voices, voices. And over time, it can wear people down and take its toll.
As part of his brain compels him to pull away from friends and family, and the voices take over, Ted, running through the sub-zero streets of a Thompson, Manitoba night, has finally jumped fully off the edge of reality and is in mental freefall.
And this was, people had their Christmas lights up in town and everything, and I remember my brain told me to run across people's yards in the deep snow. So I did that, and I remember running on top of the snowbanks alongside the road, and I ran out in the middle of the road, and I just about got run over by a police car. And he stopped his car, and he got out, and he says to me, he says, "Do you realize I almost ran you over?" And I didn't want to tell the guy that I was on training for West Point. Something inside said this guy was not going to believe me. So I just basically said, well, I got a lot of things on my mind tonight, and I just made a mistake, and I'm sorry about that. And the cop believed me. So he got back in his cruiser and took off, and I carried on. And around about this point in the evening, I started to develop a pain in my hip. And this was a very real pain. It wasn't something that being fabricated by my brain or anything. It was a real pain. And I was limping down the street, having these conversations with my brain and thinking this was God that I was talking to. And the pain was getting worse in my hip, and my brain told me the pain was going to get so great that I would be lying beside the side of the road. And I thought, I don't want to do that. That's embarrassing. I have no idea how this worked out, but I got beside a major street in Thompson, and sure enough, the pain was so intense I couldn't walk anymore. And I just lay beside the snowbank beside the road, and I tried to wave people down for help. And that's when you realize how alone you really are in this world sometimes, because nobody stopped. They maybe thought I was drunk, and they weren't going to stop for that. Well, the funny thing about this segment of the story is that as I lay there, I got assisted by a drunk guy. No kidding. There was a Christmas party going on at a Catholic church just a stone's throw away from where I fell down. And he had come out, and I called him over, and he was quite hammered, but he helped me up. And we started making our way back to the dance hall there, and I told them to phone an ambulance. And so that's what they did. And a few minutes, and the ambulance arrived. There was people standing all in the doorway there. They're more interested in the pain I was going through than they were in their own party. So anyways, they put me on a stretcher, put me in the back of the ambulance, and whisked me off to the hospital and put me in in an examining room. And then they left me. And I'm in pain, serious pain. The only thing that made me feel good was to hit the wall with my fist. And so I was doing that, and that, I guess, that distracted my mind from the pain, and it helped a bit. So I was kind of glad about that.
That's the Ted we knew. The guy who could make punching a wall sound like a good idea. But when he was there, in that hospital examination room with people who didn't know him, overcome with symptoms and with no hint of a diagnosis, Ted would have seemed very much a threat.
If they do struggle with symptoms, we don't necessarily need a diagnosis. If somebody presents with symptoms, if it is very clear that they do suffer from psychosis, I may not be able to establish a clear diagnosis of schizophrenia at that time, but I still have enough evidence to suggest treatment.
But anyways, I yelled for the nurse to come, and I said, "Can you give me something for the pain?" And she said, "I'm not allowed to do that because a doctor has to prescribe painkillers for you. I'm just a nurse. I can't do that." After she left, I said, "The hell with this. I'm going to find some painkillers myself." So I got up off the table in the room there, and I started going through the drawers and the cupboards trying to find some painkillers. And all of a sudden, the nurse came back and caught me. And she told me not to go through her drawers again. Well, anyways, her and another orderly came into the room, and they were going to take my vitals. Now, I need to back up here a bit and give you some history a little bit about what happened several days before I got taken to the hospital. I believe in my mental state that I was experiencing pressures on the brain. They felt like great emotions of fear mostly, but these feelings were quite regular, and my brain told me what these feelings were. Like, I believe this was God telling me. I didn't know it was my brain. So I believe God was telling me that one of the men who was instrumental in kicking me out of the church that I used to go to had placed a curse on me. And these feelings and emotions were part of this curse. But there was a way that I could get out of this curse, and that was if I would sit there and count to 200 out loud. No kidding. And you know what the problem was? The problem was I actually did that in my apartment, and it worked. Yeah, like I was doing this quite regularly. I would count to 200 out loud, and a lot of times the feeling would go away.
What surprises me still is Ted's energy. You can feel his logical rabbit hunter brain immediately searching for answers, a solution, even when his brain is most compromised, even when he's behaving badly in a professional space after surviving a collision with a bush, nearly getting squashed by a police car.
And also he didn't freeze to death, which unfortunately could have been a consequence of his behavior.
That's right. Despite his very rocky circumstance, his energy is still way up there, trying to figure out ways of coping with this unpredictable brain monster. How can you not root for this guy?
So anyways, here I am lying in this hospital, and the nurse comes in to take my vitals, and all of a sudden these feelings come on. So I figured, man, I don't care what these people think. I am not going to be possessed by this evil thing. I've got to count to 200 out loud. So I start, and she's trying to put a thermometer in my mouth, and I'm counting to 200. Well, she couldn't do it. So they left the room, and I finished my counting, and the feelings went away, but something else came instead. Or I should say someone. 4 police officers. And they were standing outside my examining room, and this is where life gets really strange. Because somehow I remember getting off the table and going out and talking to these police officers. Now, I should say here that I have just about a perfect recollection of everything that happened. When you have schizophrenia, only part of your brain goes on the fritz. You're cognizant in all the other areas of your mind. Certain parts of your brain just malfunction and others function. That's how I can give you the facts and details of everything that happened.
We know that it does affect different parts of the brain. Mainly parts of the cortex can be reduced in volume. We know that the ventricles can be increased in volume. It's important to keep in mind that all these findings are from group comparisons, but there's tremendous overlap between the individual groups. So none of these tests by itself can be used to prove or disprove a diagnosis of schizophrenia. So we frequently also speak about schizophrenia spectrum disorders as a more comprehensive entity that reflects the fact that we still have a lot of diagnostic uncertainty about this illness.
Well, I went out of the examining room, and I was being interrogated by these police officers. Now, the funny thing about this interrogation was, I don't know if you're going to believe this, but I was more in control of the interrogation than those police officers were. Maybe it was because the nurse had told them that they were going to deal with somebody who was mentally deranged, and I don't think they have a mental awareness 101 when they go to police academy. So these guys were just shooting from the hip because they didn't know what to really expect. And finally, if you can believe this, I got fed up with the interrogation, and I went back into the examining room and laid down on the table. Those cops didn't know what to do. So finally, it all boiled down to this thing. One of the cops came in to the room, and he says, "All right, get your boots on. I'm arresting you under the Mental Health Act." And so I got up and figured, okay, I better go with these guys. And I got my boots on, and I hobbled out to the police cruiser, and they took me downtown to the police station. Now, I should say, after I was well underway in the mental health hospital, I told my psychiatrist what had happened, and he just laughed, and he said, "There's no such thing as the Mental Health Act."
Incarcerated, but not yet medically assessed, Ted had no idea he was in mental distress and was still far from the help he needed.
Well, anyways, there I am, taken to the Thompson police station. They took away my belt and my coat and anything I might kill myself with, and they put me in solitary confinement. And that was a small cell with a steel door with an observation window. The cell was approximately 10 feet by 12 feet. It had 2 bunks, a sink, and a toilet. Yeah, and the reason I think that they put me there was because they had no facilities in Thompson for mentally deranged people at that time. So the only thing that they could do was stick me somewhere where I wasn't going to hurt other people, and hopefully I wasn't going to hurt myself. And I stayed in jail for 3 nights and 3 days, where I was observed by the police officers, and there was a doctor that came in to interview me, and a mental health worker came in and interviewed me too. I should back up here a little bit and say that when I was in the hospital, for some reason, the nurse actually gave me some painkillers. Now, maybe that was just more to keep me from going crazy on her. But anyways, when I was lying in my jail cell, the pain was way diminished, and I was feeling a lot better.
Safely in police care, Ted's family was notified. Ted's brother Vaughn.
I know my parents had talked with the RCMP, and they kind of told them what was going to happen. My parents relayed that to me, and yeah, I felt, okay, this is a good thing. There's going to be answers. I felt that there was probably no other way to deal with this. I was relieved in the sense that, okay, these things probably will still happen, but at least someone's going to get a handle on it.
Right. So, and let me tell you something here that's very crucial to the illness of schizophrenia. The person who is suffering from the illness does not believe he is sick at all. He believes that everybody else is conspiring against them. No matter what you tell them or how you convince them or what you show them, the person who is suffering the illness is always in the right and everybody else is in the wrong. And that was exactly my case. Anyways, I'm thinking like all the doctors and the nurses and the ambulance drivers and of course the policemen, there's a big conspiracy to do me in. There's major evil afoot. And so I thought, I've got to convince these guys that I'm not mentally deranged.
Ted was very methodical about what he did. He thought about what he did before he did it. He would test the waters and then he would proceed. He got into trouble, but he knew how to talk his way out of it.
Yeah, this is good. So while I'm lying there in my bunk, now this is late at night. This is approximately 12 o'clock at night. And I called the guard. I said, listen, I'm awful sorry about the trouble that I caused at the hospital. And my thinking was that if I showed them that I was apologizing, then they would think to themselves, well, crazy people don't apologize. Like, let's let the guy go. That's what I hope they would think. But the guy just looked at me and then he walked out the door, and it didn't work. I was in that jail cell for the duration, that's for sure.
Talk about complicated. Ted's brain was deluded enough to think he was at the center of a deadly conspiracy, yet still aware enough of his ability to talk his way out of trouble. And at the same time, parts of Ted's brain also worked well enough to retain vivid, even happy memories of his time there.
In fact, I had probably one of the most pleasant adventures of my life in that jail cell. And I know that in the minds of 96% of all people in this world, jail is a fearsome thing. But I'm here to tell you that if you're walking in step with God himself, you have nothing to fear by going to jail, should you ever venture in that direction. Let me just tell you why I had such a good time there. Right, the following morning, I woke up. The guard, he was an old guy, 65 to 68 years old. he came in and brought me my breakfast in a large styrofoam container, and he left. And all of a sudden, I said to myself, you know what? I'm going to have a picnic. I got my blanket, I put it on the floor, and I got my breakfast, opened it up, and sat down on this blanket. And the guard come back, and he said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm having a picnic. And the guard just laughs his head off. And he yells to one of the other guys, hey, this guy in here is having a picnic. Oh, man. My first breakfast in jail, I had a picnic.
Why did Ted's brain conjure up a childlike picnic? Was it just another attempt to impress the guards? Maybe a distraction to help him deal with his desperate situation? Maybe both. Or maybe it just made him feel more normal.
And a lot of people are good at hiding their symptoms and don't feel comfortable sharing these symptoms. But if people undergo mental health assessment, hopefully they will be able to develop trust to their treatment team and understand that the goal is to help them move on in life and feel comfortable again.
For those of us that knew Ted, knew his energy and potential to create a good life for himself, this next story, one of his many adventure delusions, may be the most painful to hear.
And now we come to the highlight of my time behind bars. This might not be a great thing for anybody else, but for me it was so memorable that in certain circumstances today, tears come to my eyes. It was the second night that I was there, and it was quite late, and I was standing by the bars with my blanket draped over my shoulders and was cherishing the adventures that were going to come my way, especially where I was going to sail with my wife to the Cape Verde Islands and then go north from there through the Baltic Sea and dock by Russia, and then in St. Petersburg, which is another name for Leningrad, we were going to go to this fancy ball. I was really cherishing these adventures and how they were going to come about, and I began to think about this ball. Now, I'm not the world's best dancer, I'll tell you that, so I have no idea how I was going to go to this ball and be a success there, but you know, when your brain's telling you what's going to happen, you pretty much believe anything in that state of mind the way I was in, so. But anyways, I was having a really good time thinking about this ball, and I was cherishing the moment that one dance would come to an end, and then the very next number was the Blue Danube Waltz. And right about then, into my mind came a few bars of the song. And I'm sitting there humming this music of the Blue Danube Waltz at 12 o'clock at night in the Thompson jail cell, solitary confinement. And my brain is not in the best of shape. But the music was so clear in my head. I cherished that moment at that time. And every time I play it, my thoughts go back to that night. And there's a very special memory.
As grand as his delusion sounds, it breaks your heart to hear it. Because Ted's story of dancing with his pretend wife at a pretend Russian ball is less about the fantasy and more about Ted just wanting to be a fun husband. Not a normal one, maybe, but a fun one. And while it still hurts to hear it, we at least know he experienced that special feeling, even virtually, even from a solitary confinement jail cell.
Now, there were other things that happened in the time that I was locked up. and made for a very interesting stay. But I'll skip those and just say that through the time that I was there, the people in charge deemed it necessary for me to be shipped from Thompson down to the city of Selkirk, where there was a mental institution. I was released from jail, was given my boots and my coat, and I didn't get my belt back, and I lost that belt for good, and that was it. I liked that belt. I wish that anyways, this next part, very hard to describe. Well, it's not hard to describe. It's just hard to talk about. There was a sheriff there to take me to the airport. And after I got dressed and stood in the lobby of the police station under guard, the sheriff came and told me that it was standard procedure for me to wear handcuffs. Jim and Rhonda, I think that when they put those handcuffs on me and put me in the back of that caged van and took me to the airport, I can never remember being so low in my entire life.
Ted's brother, Peter.
Then one day I get a phone call from my dad. We got some news about Ted. He was arrested and he's in Selkirk psych ward. What? All my brothers were crazy. I didn't think they were that crazy. I was the only normal one in the family.
With his parents 2 hours from Thompson, 6 from Selkirk, and hearing only from officials, strangers on the other end of the phone, Ted's family was at a loss.
It was hard to talk about it with anybody in the family because you don't really know anything. If there's a monster coming at you in the house, you can describe the monster, you can deal with the monster. But when you don't know, there's something that's going on that's you can't identify. And not to quote Star Trek, but to boldly go where no one has gone before, and everybody was kind of lost out in the ether on this one.
If they had known that this was a mental illness, chances are they would have been able to understand better what was going on, because for a lot of people, unfortunately, they burned the bridges.
Next, on Years Without Rain.
I gotta tell you, it's tremendously exciting.
Ted comes face to face with his mental disorder.
It's like being locked in a jail, and you come out of jail and you just start experiencing wonderful things that you were forbidden to have while you were in prison.
But will the excitement last?
We're hoping for a breakthrough to give people who suffer from schizophrenia the relief that they deserve.
Years Without Rain. Final episode next.